was thinking about this topic today, seizing the advantage, I began wondering about my own business and whether I'd actually done that, whether I just stumbled forward, or whether I'd actually seized the advantages that were that came my way. So I had this thought about, have I taken the opportunities that have come my way? And I thought I would talk a little bit about this from a bit of a personal perspective, as I say, starting off as a farmer. And I've titled my talk From Growing Grains to Growing Pains. And the reason for that was that when you're farming, you're dealing with a commodity, and there is very little way of differentiating between your product and your competitor's product. Whether this is with all commodities, it doesn't matter whether it's my lump of coal is not that different to your lump of coal, my grain of rice is not that different to your grain of rice. And so competitive advantage in those markets is somewhat different to competitive advantage in the market that I'm in now. The growing pains part of it is, first of all, I've been at various times in my career mistaken for an accountant or a lawyer, and sometimes even a doctor. So I thought it was a fitting analogy. But I did want to observe that we do go through growing pains. And I had a look at this chart, and as we know, growing is in a business is not linear. This is an American, these are American numbers, but if you have a look at it, you'll see that the number of businesses that actually managed to grow beyond the $1 million turnover is only 4%. If you go up another level, anything greater than $10 million is 0.4%. And if you go up another level, anything greater than 50 million in turnover is really just a rounding error, because what happens as you grow is you hit some obstacles to growth, and then you start plummeting into what's been called the valley of death. And we'll talk about this a little bit later to see how by seizing the advantage, you can avoid those pitfalls and continue to grow. In saying that, not all businesses want to grow, and there's a very fine balance between profit and growth. So what most businesses will do is they will choose either to focus on profit or to focus on growth, or to have a balance between the two. But knowing that as growth goes up, profit inevitably goes down. And the other factor in that equation is just risk. So if you want to increase profit or growth, you're probably increasing risk at the same time. From my personal observations, there are 6 things that I wanted to highlight, and I'll go through each of them in a little bit more detail. And as I said, this is a personal observation, may or may not be applicable to you, but certainly will get you thinking about what is competitive advantage. So the first thing is knowing your destination. And I know that often it's said that the journey is as important as the destination. That's probably true. But even if you're enjoying the journey, you need to know what the destination is. The second one, understanding your competitive advantage, and I'll spend a little bit of time on that because you can't seize it unless you know what it is. The third one, plan your route strategically. The fourth one, align your plans with your strategy. And then the focus of today, systemize, embed your processes in order to scale, or if you're not interested in growth, to become more efficient. And you'll hear from a lot of the speakers today how you can use your systems in order to systemize and embed your processes within your IT systems. And then finally, just a word of warning to avoid the hype. And I'm hoping that my talk today, I'm trying to avoid the hype. So you can listen to what I'm saying. The first thing is understand your destination. And the easiest way to think about that, people talk about begin with the end in mind and so on. I'll give you an example of this. I worked for a not-for-profit agency, or worked with a not-for-profit agency in Southern Africa for many years. And the planning process was very, very disciplined. So what you would do is say, the overall goal of this agency is to improve the quality of life of people in rural areas. That's very nice, it's altruistic. what are you going to do about it? You would then say, let's break that down a little bit and say, how are we going to improve the quality of life? And you may say, my forte is education, or you may say it's running water, or you may say it's health services. Well, even that in itself, while it's a very admirable overall goal, it's still not specific enough. So what you have to do is come up with something that is what's called a SMART goal, which is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So instead of saying we're going to improve the quality of people in rural areas, you would then distill it down and say one level below that is we are going to focus on, let's say in this case, running water. And then your goal would be by 2030, 75% of communities in a defined area will have running potable water. And that's the SMART goal. So you need to be fairly specific, but at the same time, that big, hairy, the goal, while we're saying specific, measurable, achievable, it still needs to be challenging. So hence, we've always used the term a big, hairy, audacious goal. Number two is understanding what your competitive advantage is in order to see it. And this is based largely on the customer's perception of your product or of the value. And these are some areas where customers, or how customers look at your product or your service. And the important thing here is it's not the reality, it's actually the perception. So if I say to you, which is a better vehicle, Hyundai or a Kia, it's entirely perception. It's very hard to compare. Or is a Skoda better than a VW? It's all in the minds of the customer. And these are the areas that you can look at when you are evaluating why you are better than your competitor, or if you are better than your competitor. So you may decide to compete on one or more of these things when looking at your competitive advantage. Once you've done that, you can then plot out your competitive position. And if you look at this chart, on the bottom, you've got low price to high price. And along this axis, you've got low perceived value or differentiation, high perceived value or differentiation. And I've drawn a straight line over there, which is not entirely accurate, and I'll show you why. But if you're in this quadrant over here, market success is likely. In other words, you've got high perceived value, and you can push your price up quite considerably because you've got high perceived value. If you're in this bottom right-hand quadrant over here, where you've got a low perceived value, your market failure is likely, because this is the commodity end of the market. You will have to compete here on price or cost of production. And that's the big difference between commodities and the sort of products or services that you and I are in at the moment. The straight line actually makes things a little bit worse when you look at the reality in the market, in that this is what happens. And as your price increases across here, you can see that your chances of success actually diminish over there. So it's very, very hard to maintain a position of high perceived value and high price. It's very hard to get to there, and not a lot of companies are able to do it. The same at the bottom end, that it's very hard to do that. But the big patch in the middle is the part that makes the growing pains so commonplace in businesses, because in that middle part, success is highly uncertain. And if you don't get it right, if you're not able to differentiate yourself from your competition through seizing your advantage, or lower your costs through seizing your advantage, you're going to end up in this big middle space where you're just part of the great unwashed masses that don't succeed. You're not going to be part of the 4% that do. Once you've done that, that will help you work out your economic logic. How will I make my money? And essentially, you've only got four ways of doing that. You've got to have lowest cost through your scale advantages, lowest cost through scope and replication advantages, or premium pricing. Those are your options. So that's quite a useful exercise to go through to figure out what your strategic advantage is and how you're going to embed that in your processes. Number 3 is to plan your route strategically. There are many ways to get to your destination. And this is a little bit of a repeat of what I've spoken about previously at a previous user group. But essentially what you're going to do is look external to your organization and look internal to your organization. So above the line, strengths and weaknesses, you're in control of. Below the line, you're not in control of. Things happen. You have a flood, you have COVID-19. You have to react to that, look for the opportunities and threats. If you understand your business, you can identify your weaknesses and start working on those to make them into strengths. That might be your systems, your processes, your financial systems, your production systems, whatever it is. But you move your weaknesses to strengths, and then you use that strength to take advantage of the opportunity in the outside world or to ward off the threat that you may perceive. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to use your weakness to take advantage of an opportunity. That's just simply a temptation, or a weakness to counter a threat. That's a vulnerability. So that was number 3. Number 4 is to align your plans with your strategy. So you've got your overall goal, your purpose, and then you look at results and activities. And whether you do it in that framework or have a strategy and business planning and have business systems, it doesn't really matter. The important thing is to know that having your destination keeps you on track and stops you from getting distracted. So seizing the advantage. This is what we're talking about today. What you need to do once you've identified your advantage is to systemize and to embed your processes in order to scale. That's if you want to grow. We had the discussion a little bit earlier about companies that want to grow and companies that don't want to grow. In this case, I'm focusing on companies that want to grow, but the same principles apply if you want to compete at the other end of the market where you're competing on efficiency and cost. There are benefits of scale, and this is why most companies or many companies do want to grow. And to systemize and embed your processes, you would do that across the company, and you would do that in terms of all of your systems, your production systems, your distribution systems, your IT systems, and your financial systems. And just to focus a little bit on the financial systems, there was some work done by Gartner that divided financial systems into 3 areas: systems of record, systems of differentiation, and systems of innovation. And Andrew, I am aware that I'm running down the clock now. I'm on number 5 and I only have to get to number 6. So when you look at those 3 systems, what I've observed is that at different phases of growth, there are different requirements. So when a business is relatively small, it is looking only for a system of record. As it grows, it'll look to a system of differentiation. And as it grows further, it'll look for a system of innovation. And if I plot that against the journey that most businesses that we deal with have, at the bottom end, you would be on Xero or MYOB AccountWrite or something like that. Standard, the same for everyone. Your system does not differentiate you. It's simply a system of record. In the middle over here, once you've moved on to your software such as Exo, you have a system of differentiation because you can configure it to be different to your competitors. And then as you go forward, and you may move on to a system of innovation, which means not only is it configurable, it's customizable. And ideally where you want to end up is to end up in a position. This was work that was done by Bain, and they spoke about great repeatable models. And you want to be able to scale with a great repeatable model, but at the same time, not lose the net benefit of the founder's mentality. And then finally, beware the hype. And this is simply what happens, particularly in technology, is that everybody has got something to sell. And you start off with a new technology, a technology trigger, the peak of inflated expectations, and all of a sudden that starts collapsing. You end up in this trough of disillusionment. But generally, those technologies start coming good when you have more realistic expectations, slope of enlightenment and plateau of productivity. So to finish off, Seize the competitive advantage. Try and use your systems to differentiate yourself from your competitors. Once you understand your competitive advantage, look at continuous improvement in those systems in your business. Don't be scared to reach out to your implementation partner or your trusted advisors, as Grant said. Don't be scared to integrate to best of breed systems. There's no longer one size fits all. There are amazing systems out there that can integrate into your current systems and improve efficiency and heighten that competitive advantage. Leverage off technological advances, and finally, build relationships with your trusted advisors. And Grant, that is it from me. Thank you very much.